I always have it in me, like, you shouldn't gossip. I've been, like, thinking that way for the past 3 years maybe, but I always find myself in that situation where I start gossiping. I'm like, I really shouldn't do this, and I continue to. But I brought up in that conversation, because we talked about before why you shouldn't gossip. I'm like, right when I was about to bring it up about that player, I'm like, you know what, I'm not going to gossip. And it was you, like, I do that. And I know, like, I continue to gossip after I say that. But it was you who was like, yeah, we shouldn't gossip. And it was the fact that I have that relationship with you and that you know what I, like, how I want to think and how I want to be, that we were able to change the root of the discussion. And so for people watching, when you're thinking, like, having meaningful discussions at the end of the day is purposeless, like, right there in that moment, because the day before we were talking to each other, we shouldn't gossip. The very next day, gossip came in our discussion, and we were able to shift out of it. Because instead of having a meaningless conversation the day before, we were talking about not gossiping, and we got a closer connection with each other and what we really want to do in life, not just, oh, this player is bad at basketball, this player shouldn't have done. Like, we actually got to know the things we really care about, and this is why me and you have such a good relationship that we just keep building, and we're able to do podcasts like this.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, because, like, we know each other's goals in life. Like, we, honestly, like, if I had to name, like, 5 of the main objectives that you have, 5 of the things that you're working on, I could list it, and you could probably do the same for me, right? So knowing that brings friendship in such a better, like, way than it could have in any single other way, because if, let's say I have, like, a surface level friend where it's just like, oh, you know, we just want to hang out and, like, you know, just chill, or like a surface level conversation, it's not going to do anything for any of us, right? It's going to be fun, and those relationships are important, like we know, but you need to at least have a few friends where you guys know and you guys are on the same page with these things that each other want to do, right? And just like that, if we know that we don't want to be gossiping, then we know to point out that fault, and we're fine with it, right? It might seem like a difficult thing to bring up, but because we're on the same page and we already made that justification to do so, it was completely fine when we actually brought it up when it was about to happen.
Yeah, I'm really happy because I didn't think about this before, but, like, as we were talking, I'm kind of thinking, like, what if people think, oh, these two, they just always talk in a deep way, but at the end of the day, I don't want to do that. Like, I just want to have fun and talk. You have to realize every time you talk in a deep way, there is small changes that are being made. And, like, that is just one example of it. Like, we talk to each other how we don't want to gossip, and then we didn't gossip the next day. Even another idea. Shout out Sean Fleming. He brought up, I watched your podcast. I liked it. That's that cultivated where we are right now.
Yeah.
And the other things about us having deep conversations, and now because he planted that seed, it's like now this is where we are today. So always think there is a value, even if you can't see it right now, there is a value in asking yourself, when I'm with my friends, can I talk in a deeper way? I know I'm speaking deeper, like, very generally, but we know what it means. Like, we're not just gossiping about other people. We're not talking about things that aren't going to benefit us. Try to see if you can always plant that seed of, oh, this is a way that we can grow, and let's have a conversation about it. Because at the end of the day, it will hopefully in the future cultivate us into stronger people.
And I think pointing out what makes deeper thinking is important, because a lot of people may not know, the difference. And I think like 90% of conversations are that surface level thing where it's either talking about what happened the other day, what you want to do like after today, right? Something like that, or you're talking about someone else. Like, I feel like 90% of conversations are like that. And I think the thing that separates deep thinking from that is when you're having this deep thinking, or you're having a deep conversation, you're creating new ideas that you didn't even have before. Or maybe you could have had them, but when you tie them with someone else's ideas, you get thinking on a new level, right? So with Sean, even though that doesn't seem like a deep thing, him bringing up the fact that he watched that that helped us make this. And that's not even like too deep, but you know, we talked about stuff with like artificial intelligence, and that made me think like how much of the stuff that I'm doing with business can be replaced. Like what should I be focusing on to make sure that this can't be replaced, that I can actually make money in the future by doing this, right? It got me thinking to actually make sure that I don't fall into that problem in the future. And there's so many different examples just like that, but it all comes from creating those new ideas. And when you're in a group discussion, that's when it's important, right? We always feel like in group discussions, that's when like the surface level talk should happen. But when you actually have a big group of people who all put in their ideas, that's when you can create the best ideas, right? So I just think that's very important.
Yeah. And like even when I was talking to you about AI, it's like I'm talking from my idea of like I've researched a lot into this, and I have a level of understanding that took a lot of hours of studying. It's like when I was talking to you about that, I knew that you would be missing some points I was saying. Like I'm fully aware of that. Like I'm talking over it really fast. I'm talking about the algorithms really fast. But it was just like, again, this idea of planting the seed. Like everything that, if you're willing to take in that information, every little thing that you can get, maybe you get a little idea out of it. So yeah, I just encourage people, like, if you have anything if you like any expertise, try learning how can you talk to someone else about that, and maybe they can just grasp a little bit from it.
And so I wanted to ask your thoughts about this specifically. Like, there has to be a time when you are talking about someone else, because there is a right way to do it, right? How do you see that fit? I kind of brought up the point with you need to be phrasing it in a way that you could bring it up to that person's face. Do you see it in a different way or a similar way? Like, how would you bring it up to a different person?
Yeah, we didn't completely finish that. I was also saying, like, when should you say something directly? I do think there is a time and a place for that. Like, if you're a close friend and you know that someone cares about you at a high level, that no matter what you say, they're gonna take it with like honor, and they're gonna respect what you say, then there is always a time to be brave. It is difficult, but to say you're doing something wrong, okay? And there's nothing wrong with that. Like if you can do that, I think it's honorable, and I think there's rare times where that's dangerous. It's only dangerous, you'll know when it's dangerous. It's when you're not. It's when you don't really care for the person enough to actually help them fulfill the thing that you're asking
that you need
them.
to be able to read before you tell it. Yeah.
But for the most part, it is courageous, and it's a good thing to tell someone they're doing wrong, because that's what we're here for. Life is difficult, and so many times we get caught. Like I find myself going through a simulation, and that's what life is. Like you just start building habits, especially as you get older, and you stop like free thinking about everything you should do, and it just becomes like repetitive. It's on other people to point at you and say, and the people who you're closest with, to point at you and say, you're like, this is a place that you can improve. For example, like if someone's not really like advancing themselves and like studying on their own time, and like my mom, for example, I told her she comes home and she works really hard, and she does whatever she can to help me. But I just gave her that idea of like, maybe you should try to start reading some books, like try to get your memory working, especially as you start getting older. So it's just like for her, that idea wasn't to her, like in her consciousness. That wasn't there, but it's just like giving that person an idea. Again, why is this so important to have meaningful discussions, and just to try to have meaningful discussions even if it doesn't seem like it's the right time, is because you start to bring up these ideas. Like at the end of the day, I was talking with my mom at a deeper level, and then it was when it arose, like maybe you should try to start reading books.
Right.
You know?
How do you think they would approach it if so that's like when you're confronting the actual friend, but I think there is a time when you can talk about other people without like talking to that person, right? So how would you go about that, right? Like how is there a nice way to say it? How would you try and phrase it? Are there any guidelines?
I'm not going to give a definitive answer, but I want to add what I said before about that we're all, when it comes to gossip, we have to remember we are human and we make mistakes. And a big part of life in general, in any aspect, is try to take your free will out of a situation. I'm going to explain that a little more. Don't leave it to yourself to always make the right decision at every moment. It's kind of like that. You have that idea of motivation, discipline, setting. Okay? If you really want something to get done, the most important thing is to change your setting so that it gets done. That's what I kind of mean of leaving your free will out of it. Don't focus on your future self always having the motivation and always having the discipline and do the right thing. Actually set your environment so that you do the right thing. So here's a similar level with gossip. Don't even arouse the conversation, because now you're bringing up the possibility that your human nature fails and that it goes completely awry. And that's what I was saying when I always tell myself in a conversation when gossip comes up, I'm like, but you know what, I don't want to talk about gossip. But the very idea that that conversation was started, a few seconds later, we're talking about gossip. So that's what I'm saying. I'm not going to give a definitive answer. Try to be as constructive as possible, but keep in mind human nature is at play, and you should just try to stray away from it.
Right. But so, let's say, like a friend is struggling with something because of someone else, right? Like a decision of someone else or some argument they got in. It's okay to bring up that other person in that conversation with that friend to make them feel better, right? To make them figure out whatever solution it is. But so I think in that, at least this is my perspective, and I want to hear, like, because this will have to come up eventually for certain conversations. I think, again, a good guideline is the way that you're talking about this person, or you should be focusing mainly on what the person is saying, right? You don't ever make comments about the person themselves based on something bad. That's not fair, right? We talked about this a lot. Everyone has a reason for doing things, for saying things that no person can imagine, right? I can't ever imagine, like, most of the things that goes on with you, right? Even though I understand you as a person and your goals and all of that, there's things that happened in the rest of the 10 hours before right now that I don't know everything that happened. And when you're talking about people at their very lowest lows, right? When they're in an argument with a friend, you can't really say, oh yeah, man, that person, man, they're so judgmental, they're so this and that, right? I think you just have to say, like, an objective thing, like, you know, this happened. I would just, like, give your advice and just say, I think you can bring this up to them, right? You know, you guys are good friends, like this isn't something that has to, like, permanently stay like it, right? And I think that person, you bringing it up to that person that you guys are talking about, that can work just as well. And that's kind of the guideline that can help you say, oh yeah, it's fine the way that I phrased it. But if it's in a way that you're talking down of that person, you're not just focusing on the actions themselves, or you're going, like, too in depth into it, like that's just not necessary.
And you brought up that, like, another point about a mistake with human nature is when you start gossiping about someone and start talking negatively, you're gonna take out the lowest part of that person. And especially when your mindset is, what is this person doing wrong? You're gonna only look at the wrongs that that person is doing and trying to get all the wrongs that you can.
Right.
You're not gonna balance it out and think about the other positives.
Like the confirmation bias, basically.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. You have an idea that you're looking for, you're only gonna get the evidence that fits that idea.
Right. And I think that's where it's dangerous too, because now you have two people who are focusing on that negative. And now it's like you guys are almost starting to hate on someone because, oh, what, they had a bad day and so they say something, when instead you just be like, hey, well, maybe they're saying that because, you know, like, it's tough for them too, right? Like, everyone has a reason for saying things. Well, it always seems like, you know, you're in the right or your friend's in the right is telling you their perspective. The other person, if you talk to them, right, I guarantee this has happened to you, right? You have a friend who tells you one perspective, you're like, oh yeah, what was my other friend thinking? Then you talk to that friend, and you're like, you're like, right, like, what are they? It doesn't make sense.
For sure.
And so it's like, I feel like that happens like imagine if we could do that with someone that we argued with, and we actually could take a step back and ask them, like, well, why are you saying this, right? And you actually could put away that emotion. That's something that's super important, right? That's why I feel like it's beneficial for me to clean up my language, and now I really take pride in trying to stay away from like swearing and all these different things and raising my voice, because once you do that, that puts your emotion into it, right? And the other person can see that, and then they're gonna start putting their emotion into it, and it doesn't allow you to ever take a step back. Like at this point, I can't remember a time that I've gotten into like a serious argument with a friend, because it's just not likely to happen. One of us is going to be able to be like, hey, let's take a step back. Like, why are you saying this, right? And it doesn't sound that formal when it's happening, but we just don't end up getting to that point where we're actually like mad at each other, you know?
Another point I bring up is because you say about like when you don't really get the perspective of everyone, and so the point I'm going to bring up is why it's so important to actually talk to the person face to face that you have an issue with instead of talking to someone else about that person. Is like you can get more ideas from them. So the example I'm going to bring is another Andrew Callahan Channel 5 idea is it's like Philly streets, and he's talking about, or even we can do the Jack the Blipper example. So he asked Jack the Blipper, like, why are you stealing things? And why are you, like, blipping is when you, like, break into a car and you steal stuff from the car. And he brings this idea up about, like, oh, to be honest, it started with, like, the techies, and they're all coming into San Francisco, leaving their cars unlocked, and I had to teach them a lesson. But now what he ends up doing is actually breaking into a car that he has nothing to do with.
Sure.
And so that completely contradicts what he's bringing up. And that's why I think it's so important. Another example is he has that Philly Streets video where he's talking to a guy who's distributing a drug called Trank. And this distributor is saying, I'm the reason I'm distributing this drug, which I actually would never take and I think is really bad for people, is because I know if I'm not doing it, then the next person is doing it. So in both these examples, by actually talking to the person and getting them to bring out their ideas, talking like face to face with them, they get to bring up their defense, and then you can attack that defense, and that's where you'll find the weakness in them. So Jack the Blipper, when he says that, like, I'm doing this because I feel like I have to teach the techies a lesson. By talking to him face to face, you get to see his defense, and then you get to attack that and say, this isn't how it should actually be done. Instead of just saying to him, like, you should stop doing this.
Right.
You know, it's like, again, the meaning of, like, getting into deeper conversations. You can really, like, bring up this, like, subconscious about what's really motivating your actions.
Yeah, and I think Andrew Callahan does, like, a really good job of bringing it up, because he doesn't, like, he doesn't attack. He'll ask like a question, right? And at the end, the Jack the Blipper guy was saying like, "Yo, like thank you so much. Like everything you were saying got me thinking, and I really want to do better now, right?" And it's like curiosity is really important too. You know, like if you're just genuinely ask them, chances are they'll reflect on that too, because like he honestly probably hadn't reflected before that for a while, or he does, but then he's in a bad group where everyone else is doing it, and so he just feels like it's normal, right? I feel like if we had enough people who could go up to those people who are having these issues and, you know, would be a friend there who has a different perspective, who was in a different group, in a different mindset, and then they start hanging out with someone like that, then people would end up, like, there would be way less crime. There would be way less of these people, because they're not just isolated with their own group. They could actually be with the rest of the population and realize, like, oh yeah, most people are good. Like, it's not good to break into a random car because, you know, that person could be my friend, right? Like, and then they start to get that perspective instead of just feeling like everyone's an outsider. And that's why it's really cool what he does. He's doing this journalism, and they're chill with it, right? You can tell that they're chill people. Like, if you're their friend, they'll be chill, and it gets them thinking because he's coming from an area of curiosity rather than like attacking him for being like a bad person or whatever it is, right?
Yeah, And on the surface level, you can dismiss anyone as good or bad, and or good or evil. And I think that's a danger to humans. Like, we're so, especially when you're in a mode of like aggression and you're upset at someone, you just start labeling them like everything this person is doing is bad. And we have to realize like that's not first off humanity. You have to value what it means to be human in every single person. Being human is super complex. For me, I believe like there's free will involved, but even without that, like psychologists who don't even believe in free will admit like the brain is super complex. And when you limit a human being to good or bad, you're missing so much for you to help them, and also so much beauty to life. Mm-hmm. It's really important when we're talking to people and when we're trying to help people, like try to delve into what is the real reason why they're doing their actions. Not just like this person's this way and this person's that way. Like try to get into a deep conversation with them.
That's something like, I always struggle with this question from like a theological point of view, because like it's kind of like that nature versus nurture question of, you know, if I was in his shoes, wouldn't I be doing the same thing? Mm-hmm. Or would I have been able to stop myself, right? That's something, that would be one of my first questions to God is like, you know, is my consciousness that I have right now, if I were in that situation, everything else growing up, would I be able to stop myself? Like, do I just have that consciousness? Or it could be some huge complex answer, right? I'm sure it is.
Yeah.
But it's just like a confusing thing, but we have to, again, put ourselves in those shoes, no matter what the answer is, right? They're in a situation that's tough. You know, a lot of the time they go into it for a financial incentive, and it's because, you know, it's not because they're already rich and they just want to go around getting even more rich. They're in an area where they need to do it to get food. And I think greed comes from that after, because, you know, at a certain point they're buying like luxury clothes and they're still doing it, right? So I think then at that point, that's where it's like conformity, and they're in that group and they just think, oh, let's keep going. But initially, the reason that they start is always because of a tough situation. There's like a very rare case where you're going to see someone grow up in like the nicest neighborhood and they're just going to be doing it, right? Some people might do it just because they think, you know, they're all like thug and all that, but that's a hyper minority of people who actually will go out and do that. Most people have a reason of doing so, and then they're just in the wrong group of other people doing the same.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and like with him, he said when he first started blipping, he was selling his clothes and everything. Right. And then if you see him in the video, he's wearing like a puffer jacket, which was like Balenciaga or something. Yeah. Like super expensive. And yeah, it is. I think about that all the time. Like if I was in someone else's shoes, would I do the same thing? But at the end of the day, I think we have to put that to the side and understand, like, as the Bible puts it, and I'll explain it right now why the Bible says it, you should never judge someone, because we really don't know what their circumstances were. And even if you think that you know what their circumstances were,
you can't actually.
You really don't know everything. Like, there's a bunch of small like quirks in someone's environment that can make such an impact in their life. Just like maybe seeing one person who has like a negative outlook on life and who was telling them the wrong things, the wrong mentor, but maybe they looked up to him because he had a Lamborghini. And it could have been a stranger, and that small little quirk in that person's life at one day actually had such an impact on their life. So that's why you should never judge people. All you gotta worry about is how can you help them? How can you be the other side to that? How can you be the person to tell them there is a better way to live life and there's a more meaningful way to live life, and have that deep conversation with them to actually make a change.
That reminds me, there's like something I don't think I've ever brought up to you, but I feel like everyone feels like we need to be like isolated from each other in the sense of like a friend group, right? Now, like everyone has like school friends or work friends where it's like they're not best friends, but you're still friendly. But it's like, I feel like when we grow up in school, teachers should do like a better job of having the whole class seem as if they're like a community. I think, like, just thinking about it now, if it's like the first week of school, I think something that's going to be super beneficial, more beneficial than anything else you could do in that first week, is if you had every single person in that classroom just have like a one-on-one discussion with one another, right? If there's 20 kids in a class, you just have them talk, because then you're going to see the deeper parts of their thinking and actually realize them as like the whole person that they are. Not like the full person, but you're going to get an understanding. And then when you see that person across the class, rather than being like, oh, like, what was that comment they made? Or like, oh, you know, like, we all feel like there's someone who's like, you know, a little weird in each class. But when you talk with someone just one-on-one, you still have that feeling like, oh, this guy does think, right? And he does have a reason for being like this. And maybe he has ideas that are better than mine. He has a situation that he overcame that I probably couldn't even overcome, right? And you see everyone's beauty in every single discussion, but we don't do that. We have, you know, in elementary school, you have that group that you just cling to, and, you know, at max, you know, maybe it's like 5 kids in your class, right? And you go the rest of the grades not really opening it up that much. You know, you'll be with like friends, but you're never going to talk to some random person that you've never talked to. And that shouldn't even be a possibility. You should always have that conversation early on.
I think that's a really cool idea that you bring up. It's just like this psychological tendency of humans, which is known in psychology. Like, as humans, we oversimplify the world around us because that's how we make meaning of it, and that's how we live life. Like, we oversimplify the complex world that we live in just because that's how we can get things done. We classify things as this is a light, this is a light, even though there's multiple types of lights. And just so that we can, like, there's multiple types of chairs, but we all classify as a chair. I think that tendency of humans now goes into the human being, and when you look at the classmates around you, you oversimplify them as, oh, this girl is, she's really like annoying, she overtalks, and she doesn't understand her, she doesn't understand her surroundings. This guy is a total NPC, and he doesn't have any thoughts. But again, there's such a beauty to human nature, and this is why deep conversations are valuable, because that is not who any human is. Every human has a huge backstory to them and a reason to why they get up every morning, even when sometimes everyone wakes up some mornings like, I don't want to do this, like this sucks. But then they have to come up with a reason for why they want to live life. Everyone goes through that. Every human has like a deeper side of them, and a great thing to deep conversations is for you to understand that deeper side to the human, and also for them to understand the deeper side to themselves and not look at themselves as just an NPC and someone who's just going through the motions. Again, you're like, that's the benefit to friendship. When someone's going through the motions and they're missing something that they're doing wrong, you point it out to them. So like, these all are good reasons for why you should just try to have deep conversations with people.
Right. And like, it's like frustrating too, because it goes beyond just like an in-school thing with classmates. Like, it's anyone in the real world. I feel like we should just appreciate each other's like being surrounded by people. We should never get mad at people in traffic, or like if someone cuts us off, like obviously they were in the wrong, right? But that doesn't mean that we need to get mad and they need to get mad and all of that. Like, we're all on this earth together. We've talked about this before, right? It's like aliens would be needed for us to like unite at this point, because we need like a common enemy, it seems. You know, it's funny, like you have sports teams, right? It's a perfect example. You have the town versus town, and it's like, oh, I hate that town. But then, you know, you go to a Boston Celtics game, it's like, oh, you're in Wayland. Oh, you know, you're right across the corner, or whatever it is, right? And then, you know, you're against Philly, right? But then it's Team USA versus, you know, China, right? And you're like, oh, Team USA. It's like, we're all in this world. We all, in certain areas, we can relate to each other. We all have issues. We all have all these things we're going through. And it's tough to realize that. Like, I feel like we just need to like take some time and like think about it, and everyone just like bring it up. Like, if you listen to this right now, I just need to say this like to the camera. If you hear this, like, bring it up to the other person and try and have them talk about it with other people. Like, we should not ever feel like we should be like against someone. Everyone should be like in our circle.
Yeah.
Like the whole circle is the world, right? We don't need to ever feel like we're going against anyone. That's just like a foolish idea when you think of it. There was like one time I was driving back from school, and it was like a nice day. It was like 60 something degrees, and this was like when winter was about to start. And I was just like there is no reason to be upset right now. Like school just finished, like everything was all good. And you know, I hear someone beeping their horn, and it like put that into my mind. I was like what are we doing? And at some point, maybe I'll be that person beeping the horn, and that's the issue, right? Like me realizing this, I think that's the problem. We all realize this, right? We've all had that thought before, like why are people negative? Everyone's always said that, but it's like we need to unattach ourselves from the emotions. The emotions are what stops us. And you had that quote too that kind of went into that, like. Sitting alone in the room with what was that again?
By Pascal. All of man's weakness stems from his inability to sit alone in a quiet room.
Yeah, yeah. That's like that unattaches ourselves from our emotions, and we can just be present and realize like there's no reason to be mad. You know?
Yeah, I have something to add actually with the Kanye quote, and I'm going to preface this by saying, again, to what you're saying, like, Kanye is a man who is, like, his genius is seen many times, but he's obviously gone down the wrong path recently. And that doesn't mean that we can't take the good values that he has, okay? The same exact reasoning. Like, and I think the very fact that people have labeled him as, oh, now he's anti-Semitic, we're going to completely cancel him and do away with him, is the exact reason why he continues to go down this rabbit hole. Because, and he says it time and time again, like, I don't feel the love from anyone, okay? So now, to value one thing that he says, which I've connected with a lot, he always brings up this idea that everyone has a value to them, and that everyone is good in some aspect. And he said one time on a podcast, everyone in this world is in it together. And like when he said that, he said it kind of provocatively to get you to think. It's like when you look around this world, it really doesn't feel that way at all. Like when you really expand it into like the polarization in America between political parties. Like when Trump won, people literally said like, I'm gonna leave this country, and you saw people like literally crying on television, like out of their mind, just because someone who on the other side of America are super happy that this guy just won. And it's like, you think about this what Kanye said, like, we're all in this together. It's so true. Like, there's nothing for us to be competing against each other. We all need each other in order to feel meaning in life. Okay, when I was in quarantine, I realized that a lot. Like, if it's just me on this world, there's no point, right? It's really that like connecting with each other and growing with other people. That's where value comes, you know. And I think having deep conversations with people and not just shallow ones where you're kind of just going through the motions. That's where you get that beauty in connecting with people, you know. Because when you're having shallow conversations, you're not building that connection to really know who they are.
And like it's so huge. Like I don't get how. I think this is like the future of how people will teach. Like we need to first realize each other as beings to have that true chemistry. Like I remember for AAU basketball, right? Our first practice, you know, we'll do like introductions. Hey, my name is this. I'm from this town. And you can't resonate at all with any of that thing. This person, after that introduction, is still a new person. You don't know who they are. You don't know anything about them. And then you find out later on, 2 months after, you guys still have bad chemistry because everyone wants their own bucket, right? You don't want to share the ball, right? Like you just care about yourself, because even if you have these conversations outside of the game, you're still thinking about like, you're never thinking, oh, you know, what's this person trying to do by playing basketball? Why are we here together, right? What is going to make a successful team? If you guys took time to think about like, oh, if we have like this certain rule before we take a shot, or you know, this person's really good at this person's good at this, they feel this way. If you had that open communication, like teams will be so much more successful, and like it's just crazy that like no one's putting that into practice with, you know, sports, with school, with anything like that. And so of course we're not doing it into our normal life. Of course we're not just like feeling like we can have that connection with anyone when it is possible. At any point you can go up to someone and have like a really good conversation. That's why, you know, with like older people, I love when an older person just comes up and, you know, they just start asking like, oh, you know, what school do you go to? Like, oh, you play basketball. Like, it's the best. Like where is that with us? You know, like there should be no reason. Of course, you don't have to do it every time, but just having that friendliness where it's like no one's really against you. And that's, I'll say this real quick. I learned with business, with selling, you know, Canoosby and everything. A lot of people are nicer than I expected. You know, I reach out to a lot of people on like LinkedIn and other platforms, and I was expecting some people to just be like, oh, get away.
Yeah.
Like no one has done that. And I've reached out to like maybe 800 people at this point.
Yeah.
And they're all like, oh, this is so cool. Like, I want to help you out. And it's like, if that's 800 people there, like I gave an in-depth paragraph of, you know, like myself and like what I'm trying to do. So it's like that's all they needed. Maybe in the normal life, they see like a short little thing about you, and so someone would be like, oh, this kid is cocky, or this kid is this and that. Oh, he's young. He shouldn't be doing this, right? But me just messaging and asking for help, most people are willing to help. Like that's something that like everyone loves to do, just psychologically. We love to help each other. It makes us feel good. There's like a saying, being selfless is one of the most selfish things you can do. And obviously, like, you know, it's just like a play on words because you're helping someone, but it's the best fulfilling feeling that you can get by helping someone. Everyone loves doing it.
I connect to that a lot. Like, I've seen it too when I like had this internship at MIT, as you know, and I expected people to be like kind of douchey and like act like I'm just actual exact opposite. Everyone's just trying to help you the most. Even like we have this perspective on rich people, like Jeff Bezos, like an awful person. That's what everyone thinks. And then you see him in a podcast and he's like really nice and really charming. And you see that if you actually look into it, he gives a lot of money to charity. So there's always this deeper level to people. And like truly, I learn this more and more as I go, like people want to, there's really no one I've met who doesn't want the best for other people. Like everyone at some level wants the best for other people.
Yeah, I feel like even psychopaths, to some extent, like it can happen. Like, like they can see something and be like, oh, that's wrong. Like you see it all the time. Yeah.
Like people want to help on it. There's even some people have that look to them, like I don't want to help you, but sometimes then you learn it's also just like tough love, and they're trying to get the best for you in the
people
long
have different
run.
ways of showing it, and it's hard. Like I think it also plays into like insecurity, because I think on some level people might look like they're not like a caring person, and so they might not be like approachable, is basically what I'm trying to say. And I think then if this person doesn't seem approachable, you want to be like, oh, you know, like, yeah, like I'm cool, right? Like I won't approach them, like, you know, we'll just be whatever. But that guy, that just might be like his normal resting face, right? Like, I'll even say this example. I think it was like sophomore year. A lot of time I'd have like my earbuds in the hallways, not all the time, but so I would just be like stone faced listening to music, and like I'd have noise cancellation on sometimes, and so I would just be walking by, and like sometimes, like a friend told me that like another time, maybe even you might have brought it up too, right? But I think other people did too. Like, oh, I said hi, you didn't hear, like, and I was like, oh, should I not say it? And so number one, that goes into the good thing of like, it's good that my friends can bring that up, because then I was like, all right, I won't do it as much, like even have the earbuds in, and if I do, I'll have transparency on. And the reason, like, I don't think I've told you this, like the reason I would just look forward is because like sometimes I'd be like anxious of like looking and like someone thinking that I'm like looking at them for too long, or like, you know, like I would just try and look where I'm going, because I was like, oh, I don't want to like pretend like I'm like saying hi and then, oh, they're actually not looking at me, right? Because that's an awkward feeling. So that just came from an insecurity. And other people then felt insecure because they thought that, oh, maybe I didn't like them, or something like that, or I wasn't approachable. And I think just from a general point of view, if we all realize like we all want some love, right? We all want some like friendship and kindness, and just people saying what's up, right? Someone saying hi, that means like a ton to anyone.